Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Seibert, the managing editor of CIO Media and Research, and I'm joined today by Marlin McFate, public sector CTO and CISO at Cohesity, to talk about how federal agencies can turn mandated backups into a strategic data asset. So thanks so much for joining me today, Marlin.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so to kick things off, federal agencies are required to maintain backups, but can struggle with data sprawl, duplication, and limited visibility. So, how are some of these challenges driving the need to modernize data management across government?
Good question. Let's just take a step back. Typically data sprawl is primary systems,
Mhm.
secondary systems like backup, recovery, that side of data management. They don't typically, cross paths very much. One is considered for disaster or cyber recovery, and the other is for production systems. I think that's actually something that, I thought of, 10, 15 years ago when I was talking to data people within organizations, chief data officers, data architects, that kind of thing, was this complaint or this need to be able to figure out how to figure out where all the data was within primary systems across an entire infrastructure. And the problem there was first you had to wrap your head around it, figure out where it is, then figure out how to get your hands on it, and next is to kind of figure out what that data is. I think one of the things that Cohesity has done that's unique is secondary systems or backup and recovery, something we're required to do in each one of our organizations, is already kind of a natural aggregation point for data to flow into. It also encompasses a lot more historical data than primary systems. So what we envisioned and have built is best in breed backup recovery for data and cyber resiliency. But then also by doing that, you are in fact creating an in place historical data lake. And I think that's kind of one of the definitions of modernization is where can I use a system and not duplicate efforts, right? In the traditional way of doing this, it's a lot of duplication of efforts, data for primary, then data for AI, then data for backup.
Mhm.
And this kind of, brings a couple of those together in a way that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, in your experience working with different federal agencies, what are some of the real world examples or use cases of how an agency has turned backup data into a centralized, secure resource that supports like analytics and AI?
One that I saw recently, there's a bunch of them, and I don't want to take too long. One of the ones I saw recently was a compliance thing. But
Mhm.
before we go there, I mean, think about the types of things you could do with data for AI, RAG, machine learning. We actually have a solution that will provide data for just about any data analytics or AI project. But we also, have a RAG product that we call Gaia, and that one's kind of more of like a Swiss Army knife, right? And so compliance we'll talk about, but investigation, intel analysis, data cataloging. I mean, the list kind of goes on. If you're familiar with RAG, and if you're not, please look into it. But if you are familiar with RAG, then you'll kind of understand that it's very much so a Swiss Army knife of AI. The one that I saw most recently was organization was being asked for compliance reasons, asked for, sorry, if any information about a particular event, and I think it was a legal action, they really couldn't tell us because, we would have been outside the company, so that would have been a violation there, as to whether or not anything about that particular action or legal action had been communicated to anyone outside of the organization. And what they described when we asked, what would that look like under normal circumstances is, a month to month and a half long process of digging for data, digging for, God forbid it was a while ago. I think this was 3 years ago.
Mhm.
Because then it might be in tape, it's going to be in cold storage archive. So a very long process of just trying to find that data. Then a team of people, a small team, but working through that with regular search methodologies to try to find information that might pertain to that. And what we were able to do was take that multi-person, month, a month and a half long process, figure out where the information would be. Since it's a historical data lake, it's already indexed, very easy to find information. You can also be much more comprehensive and thorough about making sure that you actually have all the data that you're looking for, right? Put that into a vector database and then present it to your choice of generative AI solutions, start asking questions against it. So you could ask, is there any evidence in this data set? that any information about blah was communicated to anyone outside of the organization. Within a couple of minutes, it comes back. Yeah, actually, it did. And here's the list of the people that it was. Here are all the, emails that were sent to people. Here are the attachments that were attached to them. And then you can continue that conversation to refine, maybe eliminating outside counsel, from that list because they were allowed to see that information. And then even start doing things. Could you, write me a summary report and, attach all of the findings to that report and then have a human. So within an hour or so, it's gotten you, up to 85, 90% of the way to a completed project that used to take a month to a month and a half to come up with a comprehensive answer.
Right. Yeah, that's incredible. And I think that's a nice end goal to shoot for, but for agencies that are just starting their journeys or early on in the process, don't know, what that first step should be. What advice do you have for them in modernizing data management in a way that simplifies adoption and delivers that value that you just referenced?
Absolutely. So actually, I just want to take a step back because this
Yeah.
is kind of interesting. That's kind of one of the really cool things about RAG, is if you have the available data that you want to have a conversation with, it doesn't take much to get to what I just described. In fact, what I just described happened in a proof of concept, right?
Wow.
So yeah. So, that's why I call it the Swiss Army knife is because one, your imagination is the limit. Two, it's just what data do I want to give it and what questions do I want to ask against it? And that could be data sets that are, really just for one use, like that example right there. But they could also be, living data sets that continually update as data changes, that you use for, an ongoing purpose, right? But that said, so it kind of encompasses one of the things that I suggest. We've seen, and this is both in commercial and in government, right? Organizations trying to go it alone, figure out how they're going to utilize AI. When I talk to government customers, oftentimes they're saying things like, yeah, we have some plans, you're kind of moving there, but you can tell that maybe the problem is they don't necessarily know what the next step is, or maybe I don't have the right expertise for the next step.
Right.
And then also, it doesn't seem like there's any easy wins, right? So what I would suggest is obviously you're going to build AI on your own. We're all going to do that. But why don't you couple that like in a hybrid approach with, off the shelf markets, COTS products, that can basically bring you valuable AI very quickly. And then also, especially ones that are more like that Swiss Army knife, where I can do multiple things with it. I can almost even test out my theories in a very easily replicatable way to figure out whether or not this particular data with this particular question set to get this answer, if there's any value to that. And you can do it really, really quickly, right?
Yeah.
That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, well, that's super exciting, and thank you so much for joining me today to, provide a bit of insight into how agencies can move forward with their data and then AI. So thanks again.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me.